there and welcome to Capital View. 7 months into the new NDA government and questions are being raised about whether Prime Minister Narendra Modi can deliver on the many promises that he has made. To answer that question and more, we have two very special guests with us on this episode. Professor Jagdish Bhagwati, Professor at Columbia University and eminent economist, N.K. Singh, BJP member as well as former member of parliament, former IAS officer. Thanks very much for being here. Professor Bhagwati, let me kick it off with you. Is it fair to say that the honeymoon is over and it's time to get down to business?
I think this presupposes the view that he hasn't gotten down to business. I think he has gotten down to business. So you see, when you look at people trying to undertake massive reforms in the system, which is what the Prime Minister now is doing in what I call the second revolution, you can't expect them in political system to go at maximum speed. Actually, if you try and do that, you're going to get, get the thing sort of getting back at you because you've got to negotiate a lot of minefields. And so what you have to really look at, in my view, I'm a gradualist, not a shock therapist, is whether the guy is moving in the right direction. And I think there's no question that a number of things have been done by the Prime Minister which are in the right direction. Such as really shaking up the bureaucratic system. That's very important. You see, we are a country which is very hierarchical, going back to the caste system in the old days. I mean, one of my friends used to say that Indians are used to kicking down and licking up, because the system is, the people beneath you just have to accept what you do. Now, given that, you see, the fact that the Prime Minister is defining a particular point of view on, like, you've got to get there on time, you've got to make sure files move very fast, that coming from the top makes the bureaucrats really shape up. And that's part of the game, part of it. Now, the next question is he going to really be able to define a vision? I was a bit worried for a while that he wasn't making an economics appointment, because, I mean, economics is a jealous mistress.
Right.
So I think the Prime Minister was hesitating a bit, but he had to get the best man. And in my opinion, I think he has gotten the best man, someone who combines acute grasp of economics with a great attention to detail. Panagariya.
You're talking about Arvind Panagariya and the Niti Aayog.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is what he wanted to. And I think it was worth waiting for that.
Right.
Because you really need a superb mind over there who's got that grasp. You see, I'll speak against myself and say, we Oxford and Cambridge types are up in the air a little bit.
But just to pursue that, when the Prime Minister says he wants to inaugurate Make in India, now, can you really have Make in India without dramatic change?
What the Prime Minister is doing is trying to scale up what he did in Gujarat. The Gujarat DNA partly consists of, creating prosperity. How do you do that? By liberalizing, by international trade, by encouraging inflow of investment. Because the Gujarati DNA is one where you ask an average Gujarati businessman saying, are you afraid of competition in trade? He said, no, the other guy should be, because they are really good at doing it. Foreign investment, they use it as a way of collaboration. They don't expect to be overwhelmed by the foreigners. So the attitude is not that of a small country. Prakash Tandon used to tell me, India's problem is that it is a big country with the mentality of a small country. That is simply not part of DNA in Gujarat, and he's trying to scale it up. Now, I think he's doing it very, very dramatically. Of course, he's not going to be able to do, retail sector liberalization, because again, that's where the politics comes in. He can't go against his party, which really has traditionally had a whole lot of what we call petty bourgeoisie, the small shopkeepers and so on. Now he's got a much more diversified, constituency, but he can't abandon the central core. So that is, in my judgment, he's going to do it in about a year's time, while he is consolidating his power.
But that's a very interesting point you make about a battle within, perhaps, that he's having to fight. Let me just bring in N.K. Singh in here. Do you think that, in fact, the political constituency for reform, which a lot of people have spoken about, still doesn't really exist? Because you have a Prime Minister with such a massive mandate, and yet he's being so cautious about change.
Well, I think that he is, on the contrary, Two things. I think first of all, I think Jagdish, I totally agree with him that he has undertaken all the right steps which are, when added together, are going to make a difference. Of course, you must realize that when you look at transformational changes can be the outcome of many incremental changes. What look initially as incremental changes over a period of time bring about a transformational change in the outcomes. And that's exactly what the government has undertaken. It has undertaken, apart from the bureaucracy, which Jagdish rightly pointed out, the re-energizing, for instance, the 300,000 crore of stalled projects and NPAs being created, ruining banks, public money being stuck on roads and power, putting life and energy back into these stranded assets. Or, for instance, some of the more audacious measures which have been taken, no doubt, to the ordinance route. I think instead of allowing time and momentum to be lost, I think that he has acted with audacity.
So aren't there really serious obstacles in the way? And doesn't the Prime Minister have a problem in raising expectations too high and risking disappointment?
But I think it's not a matter of raising expectations too high. The counterpart of that is raising your vision high. I mean, one of the things I often say about since President Obama is coming, he used to play basketball. You're reaching out for the basket and for the sky. Now he's playing golf, putting little balls into little holes, and that's narrowing his vision. I mean, this is just partly a joke, but right. The point is, you have to have that vision. That the Prime Minister very definitely has, and I think he also has a very definite idea that growth is really important to this, and how do you actually achieve also effect on the poor? Because
but if you look at the specifics, for example, the Land Acquisition Act,
right?
Now there you've pushed it through an ordinance, and you've made the Congress is arguing that you've substantively changed the law and brought it through ordinance. Right. They're going to agitate against it. The left is going to agitate against it.
Right.
So what will be the future then? You're going to have a deadlock on land acquisition.
But that presupposes that he's not going to be able to master the ability to run, change the political system, say on Rajya Sabha. And I think when he moves into something like executive orders or ordinances, that is exactly what President Obama has had to do. Because when the legislature doesn't function constitutionally, you are able to use executive action.
Is he going to have to be a little more of a reconciler with the opposition, reach out to the opposition
Frankly,
a little more?
I think, yes, of course, in the sense that governance is always managing contradiction and reconciling. But I think that in the respect of these ordinances, let me say that the choice for the Prime Minister was a clear choice. Either he postpones action which are necessary to impart momentum to the stalled growth process, or he takes the audacious step which he has taken of going it through the ordinance route. Frankly speaking, I think that the people of India are the ultimate judge. And by ensuring that growth is not stalled, but the growth momentum is reinvigorated, it was impossible to acquire any land even for a hospital or a school in terms of the numerous restrictions which had been imposed under the old law. He has not lowered the compensation to farmers.
In all countries in the world, you have to have clear definitions of what is socially desirable, and then have the rules under which you acquire. I think where we were going wrong was helping industrialists get land at low prices for all sorts of things. I didn't see why Tatas should have been given land by the communist government of Bengal at a low price. Let them pay the market price. So the government should not get involved in that. But when there is a social purpose which we politically define, and in America this is called taking, and that taking, the latest case was one where a mall was being established, and the Democratic majority in the Supreme Court said, that is important social purpose because it raises revenue. Right. Otherwise, the county will go under. So we have to define that. That only politically we can define it. It becomes exploitation only if you've got a large majority of people being told you can't hold up. But if a small minority is doing it,
small, minuscule,
that should not be allowed to do it. And in fact, many of the people who are selling the land want to be able to sell
they want the
land.
market price. Let me just come to the point you made about the petty bourgeois forces within the BJP, within the Sangh. Is that, do you think, the Prime Minister's main problem, that he has this enemy within?
Prime Minister Modi, I don't think, having talked with him several times and so on, and looked at his record, he just happened to be born in an RSS environment. Now, again, I keep drawing on analogies with America. You take President Obama, when he was coming in, he'd been going to that very radical church all the time. But that's the way, that's how he begins his life, you see. But he grew out of it. And when people were saying, he's going to
So you're saying Modi's grown out of the RSS?
That's what that's my strong belief, because I've seen nothing by him after the 2002 communal riots. I've seen nothing by him which encourages, aids and abets anti-Christian, anti-Muslims, and he continuously...
But you said in an interview recently that he should speak out against the hardline Hindutva.
I think he should, but that's a matter of how you handle it. And I think he ought to do that. He ought to say, look, this is not the way Hinduism is, because Hinduism is not a proselytizing religion.
So what would you like to see Mr. Modi? What would you like to hear Mr. Modi say?
I would like him to say that, look, we are not a proselytizing religion. We really... If you become a Christian or if you become a Muslim, that's fine, you're still one of us. That is the Hindu approach is inclusive, not exclusive. It's the proselytizing religions which are exclusive. So the real Hinduism consists in being inclusive. And the notion of converting people is foreign to us, totally foreign to us. And that's what he should be telling, these Sangh Parivar and whatever, all these people who I think are fundamentally wrong-headed about him. If he said something like that, and he's a brilliant articulator, as you know, he should be able to make an impact. Now the question is, when would he want to do that? I think the situation is becoming one where there are too many of the things going wrong. And I think people are beginning to worry about it. Maybe that...
Are you getting worried about the surround sound? The Hindutva surround sound, Ghar Wapasi.
Yeah, only in the I know, because it's totally in contradiction to what Hinduism stands for. So they're really wrong in doing it. And I think what it's doing is giving a handle to a whole lot of people who want to undermine the Prime Minister on his economic agenda.
First, I think there seems a huge misunderstanding about the RSS, because I do not believe that what the RSS it's being depicted as in a light which is continuously so negative. RSS has a very credible record in terms of having done a very, very important constructive activity for India's economic and social development, I think, in multiple ways, and is genuinely a credible voluntary organization. So, but one thing the Prime Minister has made very clear, that's my second point, is that he will not allow his focus on economic reforms, on economic progress to be deflected or to be diverted in any way from any of these other things which people find very debatable.
But anyway, I think what worries me is that that agenda and that approach could be undermined, as Sagarika is saying, by accumulating discontent,
social disharmony. But how much of this social disharmony actually impacts the economy? Is there a relationship?
Well, it could be it's somewhat exaggerated too, because frankly speaking, I think that a lot of what people, the opposition parties are almost giving the impression as if that vast parts of India are in turmoil, or the lack of... This is a complete exaggeration in my view. And I think it's an exaggeration to suggest that the Prime Minister has got deflected. The Prime Minister, no important initiative of the Prime Minister has in any way got deflected by any of these kind of controversies which have.
So you don't think the cacophony is impacting the economy at all, or can impact the economy?
Right now, yes, but
it's
we're
not impacting.
Forecasting into the future. But I think I would side with NK that so far there's no evidence of any disruptive effect, and actually reminds me of a cartoon which I saw in the Punch on two dervishes in the desert, and they're reading Al-Aram, the Cairo newspaper, and it's really peaceful and quiet, and they're saying, it says we are in ferment. And I think there is something to what NK says, because if you keep repeating this, you wind up believing that there's a...
And by the way...
But you have to plan ahead.
Right. Let's take a short break at this point and come back and talk lots more to Professor Bhagwati and NK Singh on the issues facing the Narendra Modi government. Welcome back to the special edition of Capital View. We're talking to Professor Jagdish, Bhagwati and NK Singh on whether or not Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be able to deliver on the many promises he's made. The question being asked is, will Bhagwati win or Bhagwat win?
That's a good one.
Will Jagdish Bhagwati prevail over Mohan Bhagwat, the RSS Sarsanchalak?
Actually, I'm worried.
Where are you on that one?
Internationally, people may think it's the same guy. They can barely pronounce our names to begin with. But
who do you think will prevail?
Oh, I think
you will prevail.
Bhagwati will prevail, because the one impressive thing about the Prime Minister is that he's a doer. One of the things that really impressed me was that he took me to see Vivekananda. Now, two things impressed me about him was Vivekananda was from Bengal, so there was no son of the soil rubbish. You know, I mean, he was admiring somebody who was not a Gujarati. And two, the reason why I liked Vivekananda was because Vivekananda also had shifted from Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's view of the Bhakti Marga, you know, me and God. Vivekananda was into Karma Yoga, me and mankind. And that was, you see, again, reinforcing the other part of Gujarati DNA, you see, which was that we accumulate wealth, but we spend it on social spending. Problem with the UPA 2 government was they wanted to spend the money, and they were spending it, but they had nothing coming in.
Right.
And so that clearly led to inflation and undermined them. So I think that what was missing was this clear clarity of vision, which I think the Prime Minister has.
He does have that.
That you have to have the money to spend it. And how do you get the money? That's part of the other Gujarati, by making money.
Is that happening? Do you think that
very
that
definitely
is happening?
He's scaling it up.
He is scaling it up.
And I think, look at what's happening this week. The large numbers of people are coming in, wanting to do the investment and so on. It's unbelievable.
The Vibrant Gujarat Summit has just taken place in Gujarat. Before that, you had the Bengal, Let's Do Business in Bengal. Are the states going to be increasingly the places where the growth will happen? And does Mr. Modi have to then facilitate the states?
Well, I think that, you know, he has begun by restructuring of the abandoning the old planning commission. And one of the very important mandate of the Niti Aayog, in fact, is to foster cooperative and genuine fiscal federalism, to get states to become very important actors, realizing and recognizing, having been a very successful chief minister, that the states have to become important partners, cooperative partners, and to foster this partnership in the development objectives of the central government.
Do you think he's an instinctive reformer? Is he like Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan? Is he an instinctive economic reformer?
Margaret Thatcher and Reagan were dismantling a lot of stuff, right? They were conservatives who were, in fact, who believed in a sort of trickle-down approach. At least that's the phrasing which was used, which was a sort of passive strategy. He's completely different. He's into what I call pull-up strategy, using growth in order to pull people up.
But the question is that mindset change. You know, just to pick up on the bureaucracy point and put that to NK Singh, do you think it's enough that the bureaucracy is made more dynamic, that people are coming into work on time? How do you actually affect that mindset change by which you move from obstructionist to facilitator?
Well, I think by two things, and both these things Mr. Modi has done in a credible way. First, I think the bureaucracy was demoralized because you were not protecting bona fide decisions of the bureaucracy. If you are reopening cases which are 10 years old and subjected to CBI investigation, which serving bureaucrat would like to stick his neck out and take a decision? So I think bureaucratic empowerment, decentralization of decision making, and protecting the bona fide decisions of the bureaucracy are the critical ways of making bureaucrats not obstructionists, but bureaucrats being viewed as an important stakeholder in the prosperity, rapid decision making, and not acting as a hurdle, but acting as something which facilitates change.
But the critique of Mr. Modi's form of governance is that, it's too centralized in the PMO.
When you talk of decentralization or not over-centralization, I mean, he sees the states also as actors in the change. Like he himself was one of the people, in fact, probably the most important person, experimenting with things which were not very popular with, in terms of and the same way, the Rajasthan model, now, Rajasthan is moving into labor reforms, right? And that is again something which will play a similar role from the BJP side.
Which other states can replicate.
Exactly.
Right.
So that diffusion and experimentation is also getting away from the notion that everything is centralized into what Mr. Modi wants.
Do Indians perhaps need to be a little more patient, you think? Are people expecting too much from Mr. Modi too quickly?
Yeah, but that's inevitable because after the UPA 2 disasters, as it were, for a variety of reasons, I think people are now fed up. And I think it was also, I remember the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh saying how, people used to ask the Prime Minister Rao, why are we so behind? What's going on? So people get impatient.
Right.
And that also pushed people. So the diaspora and our own people, the young people who voted in a massive way for change, are impatient. So they are going, but that impatience is a good thing. Because that keeps you on your toes.
I want to get your views on another area, actually, on education. I just wanted to ask you, are you worried that there's too much of RSS interference in education?
I think there are certain issues, like how do you teach Ganesha, with that. Now, in my view, the Prime Minister got carried away because this is a metaphorical
The Vedic
thing.
science
This
thing.
is a metaphorical thing. He's not like Murali Manohar Joshi or something, where he says, you genuinely believe it. I mean, there are people who...
But the recent statements that, we knew how to fly aeroplanes in the Vedic age and...
We had this all the time, you see. We go back into history to derive some sense of self-importance because we've lost it, you see, in the last many years. And I think to gain that, we don't have to do crazy things, but they should not be allowed to dictate textbooks and things like that. I mean, most definitely. But I think ultimately...
They should not be allowed to dictate textbooks.
No, I don't think so. Best antidote to that is actually education itself. When people are educated, they will not believe this sort of thing.
Where do you stand there on the education agenda?
I really believe that these are one way of resurgence of a national pride into India's past. And I think that it is not really a design to substitute science for fiction. It is part of the resurgence of Indian heritage and Indian pride. Because I think that the Prime Minister is sanguine to realize with his skills program, with the fact that the most important challenge in education is to combine access with quality, is to create education institutions which are in a position to impart pedagogy and skills which will make them employable.
But the best antidote to such rubbish is more education on the part of people, no matter what the textbooks say, particularly, at the secondary and higher level. Because when the mind is opened up and you start questioning things, you'll automatically see this to be rubbish.
My very last question. How much do you give him out of 10?
Oh, I would give him 9.
9 on 10. What about you?
I would give him 9.75.
9.75 out of 10. Professor Bhagwati, N.K. Singh, thanks so much for joining me on this very special Capital View. Thanks so much for watching Capital View. Come back again next week for another episode. Thanks for watching.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.